Hello, listeners. It's Gunter here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number 1 in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts to listen and follow in 2024. With an average of 50,000 downloads per episode each week from listeners all around the world, our reach is significant and growing. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer at miranda@noirtainment.com. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host, and in today's episode I'm going to focus on something that I've focused on before, but I think is immensely critical that we get right. And unfortunately, the getting right bit has been a little thin on the ground to some degree. So, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about men and parenting. And so, we could talk about parenting and masculinity, but I want to sort of focus it down onto, essentially men as the parent. And the subtitle to this podcast is Shaping the Next Generation. So in this podcast, I want to discuss the importance of attachment in child development and the impact of disturbed attachment, and then explore the different approaches to fathering boys and girls. And as you know, always maintains there's some differences, but there's also some similarities about how we dads can bring up boys and girls. I also want to explore how our reimagined masculinity, based on making good men great, can positively influence our parenting styles and, more importantly, the child's development. So let's get started. So the first bit about all of this is, as always, about attachment and its importance. So attachment is the emotional bond that forms between a child and their caregiver. This bond is crucial for the child's development, providing a secure base from which they can explore the world. And ultimately, secure attachment leads to a healthy emotional, social, and cognitive development. There's a whole bunch of research in that area. Some of you who are interested, please go away, check it out on the internet. But it is a cornerstone. I spend quite a lot of time with clients and exploring their, history from childhood onwards. But often one of the things that we don't necessarily can establish well is the conception to birth and the first 3 months. sometimes that's really difficult. And within that lie a number of really important cornerstones. So, if the pregnant mother is persistently highly stressed, then that can also have an impact on the baby. And then there's the birthing experience. And from the birthing experience, there's the first week to 2 weeks in which, mother and baby, as well as dad, should be really getting closely bonded. Now, all of that can represent some major challenges. So, in that context, let me consider for a moment a father who consistently responds to his infant's needs with love and care. Now, that particular child is basically going to get the message that one, dad's there, but more importantly, that fundamentally the world's a safe place. And therefore, that child is more likely to develop trust and confidence. This foundational relationship sets the stage for the child's future relationships and their ability to cope with life's challenges. Now, we're spending an enormous amount of time at the moment talking about building resilience. Well, I can tell you that resilience begins right up front, hopefully from the point of conception. Now, what happens on the flip side? So, what happens when attachment's disturbed? So, keeping it in a nutshell, and I could literally do, a whole host of programs on the process of attachment, about disturbed attachment, its impacts on the various functions of the child, its development, and ultimately its experiences in adult life. I don't have that time. So, let me, in a nutshell, talk about what the impact of disturbed attachment is. Disturbed attachment, that is when that bonding is frayed or broken, has a significant negative impact on a child's development. Now, if the caregiver is inconsistent, anxious, ambivalent, avoidant, neglectful, or overly harsh, the child more than likely will develop an insecure attachment. And that leads to issues such as anxiety, depression, and difficulty forming healthy relationships later in life. Now, there are some neurologically based conditions that we see, for example, autism. That's different, right? Now, in my view, with ADHD, some of that thinking is also still out because we still don't have necessarily really good scientific evidence for what's going on there. Now, my personal belief is that more than likely in some people with ADHD, there has been some disturbance in attachment wherein they did not learn self regulation and self soothing. So their system's hyper aroused. Now, let me come back to this disturbed attachment. I want to give you an example of how that could play out. So imagine a dad. Now, this dad is emotionally distant and quite unresponsive to his child's needs. Now, one of the things that's going to unfold is that this child might begin to struggle with self esteem and also exhibit behavioural problems. Furthermore, they may struggle to trust others and from there develop close and supportive relationships, and further on down the line, intimate relationships. Now, if I can get dads to understand the importance of attachment, that can help him to create a nurturing environment that fosters that security and that safety and ultimately that healthy development. So if my child, say for example around the age of 7 or 8, is feeling anxious, as a dad, I can step in and begin to work with my son or daughter to begin to feel more attached to me, to begin to feel safer with me. How might I do that? Might be a simple thing. Whenever the child gets slightly anxious or agitated, we can sit together. I can cuddle the child, I can talk it through, I can help that child to focus on its breathing until they begin to calm down. So when we feel securely attached, we begin to experience ourselves and the world from a much calmer perspective. Now, if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to get in touch with me. I'm always open to either feedback or to helping people understand these concepts more. If there's nothing else that we do but improve this aspect of our relationships with our children, we will begin to create a healthier community. For a start, it's going to be healthier in the family, but we take that into the world. So I'm going to create, firstly, less pain for myself and less havoc for people that I'm trying to be in a relationship with but struggle. So good attachment beats disturbed attachment. Now, one of the things that's important is to take into consideration that there are some differences, obviously, between boys and girls, and how is it that I might interrelate with them to help them develop. So there's some similarities, but there's also a few core principles, all right, that stay the same. And, I want to build on those similarities and then talk about some differences. For me, the core principles are always about love, respect, support, and guidance. Whether directly or indirectly, part of a child's development is to become socialized. And part of that socialization is to have empathy, to have a sound set of values, and how to respond to people in relationships, and how to respond to the world more flexibly. All right. Now, one of the things that seems to be very, very important is to recognize that boys often need more nurturing in many respects than girls. Girls can be quite, at least appear quite independent a lot earlier than boys. Now, I'm not saying that girls don't need nurturing, but in my experience, it seems to me that boys, especially 0 to 6 and 7, maybe 8, really need a lot of input. So both mum and dad, and I'm not saying mum's not important, but dad really needs to step in, and it's above and beyond the sort of stuff about sport, wrestling on the lounge, or whatever it is that we do physically. We need to get in there and model to the boys how to express emotions in a healthy way and to cope with what society expects of us, right? But we then need to teach them what is their personal expression of being male, right? We know that the social expectations of masculinity currently is a drawback. It's not healthy. We haven't reached that general level where the traditional male has been replaced by a reimagined masculinity that's healthier. We need to really help boys learn to differentiate the two. And part of that is about, how I relate to myself, but also my relationships with others and the issues about empathy, emotional intelligence, respect. So lots of stuff about values. Anyone who tries to argue that we shouldn't or don't need to teach kids values, that they need to discover this on their own, is off target. So, in that context, I want to then be able, with a daughter, to support her ambitions, to support her sense of self respect as an equal to males. And part of that is coming through my relationship with her, where she develops her sense of self worth and self confidence. So that needs to be very, very strong, because in a culture that still continues to overvalue the masculine, she's going to need to have a strong basis to counter that. So both approaches are vital in helping children to grow into well-rounded adults. So boys we focus on the emotional expression in addition to the physicality. With girls, we focus on the strength of personhood, the emotional strength, but also how can she get in touch with her physicalness? That is, her, being adventurous, being a bit of a risk taker, not being ruled by fear or stepping back or avoiding. Lots of girls don't engage in things because they, feel that they would expose them to ridicule from others. Now, on that note, one of the things that I tend to see as being a problem is that in our school system here in Australia, we have boys and girls uniforms. And guess what? Boys wear pants, girls wear dresses. Now, in primary school, I don't think it's necessarily such an issue, but when girls get to high school, they become more self-conscious, and the dresses restrict their tendency to be more physical in their interactions. And I see that as a problem. I think we should have essentially androgynous uniforms where girls can choose what they want to wear, so can boys. Now, I don't see too many boys rushing out there and hopping into a girl's dress uniform, but I can see a lot of girls making the choice that they'd rather wear shorts or pants because that's going to give them more mobility. They can express themselves physically more. So, coming back to parenting sons, I want to make sure that my son can talk to me about his feelings and that vulnerability is okay, and that's it's a strength that can help him counteract that traditional sort of overly stoic, emotionally inhibited type of masculinity. Now, for a daughter, I'm going to actively support her ambitions. I'm going to actively treat her as an equal. And I expect my son, her brother, to do so as well. And I will step in if I see that there's a discrepancy in that relationship on that basis. So let's talk a little bit about what does a reimagined masculinity in the realm of parenting look like? In other words, what is going to happen to my parenting as a male if I ditch patriarchy? Well, what's going to happen is I'm going to embrace qualities such as empathy, emotional expression. I'm going to embrace collaboration. I'm going to embrace helping a child to understand themselves emotionally better, to not be competitive when they feel scared or when they want to dominate and take control. So, part of that process requires me to be authoritative, but not authoritarian. And as a dad, I'm going to get involved in the raising and nurturing of my child at a very early point, as early as I possibly can, and then try to maintain that right throughout their childhood, their adolescence, and early adulthood. I want to be an active part in nurturing my child physically, emotionally, socially, intellectually, and give them the best foundation to be a whole, healed human being. So I'm going to do things like I'm going to openly communicate with my kids and show them that I, as a male, am equally taking part in caregiving, in domestics, that I'm going to share this with their mother, not as a way of helping the mother, but that we're two equally responsible adults collaborating in this construct that we call a family, and in the construct of me being a dad and her being a mum, and you guys are our children who we love and we adore. But there are also some limit setting. So I'm going to be teaching my kid about how do we, teach discipline, emotional regulation, reduce impulsivity. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm going to be involved in as a father that contributes to my child's or my children's development. So, how do I wrap this? Well, let me call everybody to action. That's how I'm going to wrap it. This fundamentally is a call to action. If we want a healthy community, a healthy society, the priority is to form well bonded, well attached relationships that are based on sound principles. Most of the stuff that I talk about, inevitably, all of it, is scientifically grounded. Now, some of the science changes over time because science doesn't give us just answers. In fact, the best thing about science is that it just helps us form better questions. So, what's the call to action? So, as a parent who has an understanding of attachment and the unique needs of boys and girls and the principles of reimagined masculinity that can profoundly shape the next generation is a must. We as dads play a crucial role in fostering secure attachment, emotional health, and balanced development in our children. So, again, let me come back. This whole process has elements to it that interconnect and that lead from one stage of development to the next stage of development. These are not things that we do in isolation, it's a continuous weaving of a fabric of relationship. So, on that note, folks, let me thank you for joining me today on Inspire Change with Gunter. Let's continue to support and educate each other, especially on the importance of positive, inclusive masculinity, and especially in things like intimate relationships and parenting. Together, we are able to create a future where our children are going to thrive, our community is going to thrive. So until next time, stay engaged, stay inspired, and keep nurturing the potential within the next generation. This is me signing off. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda at noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.